Hi everyone, I'm Matt from Look Into Bitcoin, and today we're going to be looking at a potential new gold-backed currency. To do this, we'll be using a number of resources that are all freely available on lookintobitcoin.com, your number one source for Bitcoin information. And if you haven't already, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to ensure you're receiving all of our content as soon as it's released. So right now we're just on the Bitcoin hash rate chart here, which is looking at the current mining capacity for Bitcoin and the Bitcoin network. And as we can see, this continues to make new all-time highs fairly frequently. But today we're not going to be focusing too much on Bitcoin. We're going to be looking at our second favorite mineable asset, and that is gold, which has recently been discussed as potentially the backing of a new currency. Now, this currency is looking to be implemented by countries that are within BRICS. Now, that is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, potential gold-backed global currency for trade would really disrupt the global economies and markets, especially as pretty much all countries are currently operating on a US dollar standard. So for international trade, and especially for oil purchases, for example, a lot of this is done using the US dollars. So a new global currency for trade, and especially one that actually has a tangible backing, a tangible value, unlike the US dollar or other fiat currencies, which aren't actually backed by anything apart from the belief we have that it is worth something. It's really interesting to actually think how this would pan out and how this may impact the price of gold and other assets such as the S&P 500 and of course Bitcoin. So if we go to the gold chart here, we can see in the past few days since this has actually been announced, we've had a number of positive price action days for gold, and we're actually up a fair few percent just after this announcement, just for the rumors of a potential gold-backed currency being released in the future. But if we actually just scroll back a little bit here and actually compare gold to the price of the S&P 500 and the US dollar to see if we do have a sustained increase in the price of gold, how will this likely impact other traditional markets? So if we just zoom out and add on the price of gold here, I'll just turn this into a line so it's a bit clearer. We can see this gold line here is gold. This red line is the S&P 500. And what we can see is they share an almost inverse correlation, meaning as one increases, the other usually decreases. So we could see here as the S&P rallied substantially to the upside in the late 90s, just before the dot-com bubble, gold was decreased substantially. And as we had some more sideways price action before the global financial crisis, gold had an exponential rally to the upside. So these are quite inversely correlated. And especially as well, if I just hide the S&P and add on the DXY, which is the US dollar strength index, we can see again a very similar trend where as one is increasing, the other is usually decreasing, and as the dollar's gaining strength, usually we see gold decrease as well. So it's very interesting to see the correlation between this, and likely if we see a huge rally to the upside in gold, it may lead to lower prices in the S&P 500. What we can actually do is look at a ratio between gold and the S&P 500 to see how that correlates with the general strength in asset prices. So here what I've done is just divided the S&P 500 by the price of gold to see how many ounces of gold you could buy with your one S&P 500 if it worked like that. But what we can see is if we add back on the S&P 500 chart, we can see once we see large decreases in this ratio, it usually coincides with either market recessions or at least stagnant or decreasing prices in traditional markets, especially when we look at US equities in this example. So once we see this ratio start to decrease, the purchasing power of your S&P 500 when buying gold starts to decrease noticeably. We get these very stagnant periods in US equity prices. So if we to start see this again turning over as we see the price of gold increase radically in comparison to the S&P 500, we may start to see traditional market prices flatline and potentially even start decreasing. And especially as well, if this new currency, this gold-backed currency, starts to displace the US dollar in parts for international trade, and we start to see the US dollar index start decreasing again, this also only adds more fuel to the fire of potentially radically higher gold prices. But one thing we actually need to take into consideration is this isn't a new phenomenon. If we see a gold-backed currency, the US dollar did actually used to be a gold-backed currency. If we go back to the previous chart, which was just the gold chart, and actually scroll back, we can see until 1971, the price of gold was actually flatlining at $35. Now, this is due to the Bretton Woods system, which backed the US dollar and ensured a conversion of US dollars into gold bullion at $35. So this actually limited the price of gold. And it was actually only after the Bretton Woods system collapsed and the US dollar became a currency that was not backed by gold or anything for that matter. It was only after that we saw this huge exponential increase in the price of gold from $35 to a few decades later over $100 and then into the thousands, where we currently sit now just beneath $2,000. So if we would see a gold-backed currency, I wonder if we'd actually see the gold price stagnate or even decrease. Because if a new currency is wanting to be backed by gold, they don't necessarily want the price of gold to increase exponentially, as it'll greatly impact the frequent trade that's going to be done in this new currency. So a lot of speculation here. It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, especially as well if we get something like a CBDC, like we see in places like Brazil as they're currently testing and implementing. Would this open the door for a gold-backed central bank digital currency? It's quite interesting to think about, as this all ties into Bitcoin and the crypto markets in general, because with any conversation of a CBDC, there's always going to be conversations about Bitcoin and other crypto assets as well, especially if it's running off something like an ERC20 standard, which, if the rumors are to be believed, would mean that this CBDC could run on a network very similar to Ethereum, the digital asset market's second largest cryptocurrency. So very interesting to watch. Of course, this is all just rumors at the minute. There's not been anything confirmed, and there's definitely not any release date or anything like that, but just something to keep an eye on as a potential volatile price action period for gold, S&P 500, and then, of course, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So just to summarize, reports of a potential new gold-backed currency introduced by BRICS countries has resulted in speculation and anticipation of a large gold price rally. And the US dollar was actually previously backed by gold until 1971, although the price of gold only actually rallied much higher after this convertibility ended. So it's a really difficult situation to kind of predict what may happen, because obviously a gold-backed currency which would require huge reserves of gold is likely going to increase the demand while supply doesn't match this demand increase, which would lead to higher prices. But if you're backing your own currency by a tangible asset like gold, you don't necessarily want exponential price rises in something you're trying to accumulate and back your currency with. So just something we have to keep an eye on. But what we can see is historically a rally in gold has coincided with a decrease in the strength of the dollar and an outperformance of gold in comparison to a US market index such as the S&P 500 has aligned with the recessionary market conditions and decreased equity prices, which, given the correlation of Bitcoin and the US market and their equities, this may lead to some volatile price action in Bitcoin and crypto assets, potentially to the downside. But given all of the facts we discussed previously and potentially CBDCs being implemented in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies rising in usage and popularity, we may actually see a decoupling and rising Bitcoin prices as a result of all of this. If you liked this video, then please visit lookintobitcoin.com, where you can also consider becoming a site subscriber to gain access to live charts, in-depth newsletters, indicator alerts, private trading view scripts, and more, all for a fraction of the standard industry price. And let me know in the comments down below and on social media, what are your thoughts with the current potentially new gold-backed currency being released by BRICS countries? Do you think it would be good for Bitcoin and crypto assets, or do you think if it were to be released, it would actually be bad for asset prices, especially in cryptocurrencies, but also other traditional markets such as US equities like the S&P 500? As I said, let me know. I look forward to reading and replying to all of them. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.